For more on this, I'm joined by criminal lawyer Rob McDonald. He is in our downtown Toronto studio. Rob, appreciate the time this evening.
Thank you for having me on the show.
Let's first talk about Bruce McArthur. What do you make of the sentence?
I think it's an appropriate sentence. Justice McMahon had a tough decision to make. He's one of our most respected judges in Superior Court here in Toronto, and I think it does bear in mind all the appropriate principles.
Mm-hmm. Do you think his age, his health conditions, et cetera, may have made a difference in this?
Well, I think at the end of the day, what everyone has to realize is that Mr. McArthur is not going anywhere. If he even gets to his 25th year in prison, where he would first be eligible for parole, that certainly doesn't mean he'd be granted parole. That would be his first opportunity to apply for parole. The chances of him being released, even if he's alive at that time, is unlikely.
And let's take now, of course, Alexandre Bissonnette being sentenced as well today, the Quebec mosque shooter. What is your take on the verdict and the judge's decision?
Well, here's a case where we do have a younger offender, and it's also a lengthier sentence. Again, bearing in mind that for Mr. Bissonnette, the actual murder sentences are running concurrently, just as they are for Mr. McArthur, but there's the extra years tacked on for the attempt murder. Again, I think that the Canadian system here is taking a step away from the American system, which has consistently for decades tacked on sentence after sentence. I think the American system has a lot of flaws. It wasn't until 2011 that the Canadian system could even tack on back-to-back sentences for mass murders.
Do you think these cases set a precedence?
Well, I think that if you look at some of the other cases that we've seen, for example, we saw the Wettlaufer case where we had a nurse in that situation who was also sentenced for the murder of 8 elderly individuals. She also received a concurrent sentence. I think what we're seeing here is a trend in Canadian courts to typically, for mass murders, to go with a concurrent sentence, but there's nothing that binds future judges from having to do that. Now that the criminal code was amended in 2011, it's open to a judge to go with consecutive sentences.
Alexandre Bissonnette will be 69 years old when he is eligible for parole. Do you think he will see the light of day? Could he be granted parole at that time?
I think it's possible. Again, I would be very surprised with someone who's committed such atrocious acts, hate crimes here, that he would ever be released on his first or second or even third application for parole. So although 69 would be the first age that he could even apply, I wouldn't think that he would be seeing the light of day until into his 80s at the earliest.
What about the families, the friends, the community, those that have been affected by all of this, that have been following these cases very, very carefully? I mean, I'm sure you saw the clips earlier. Reaction to Alexandre Bissonnette's sentencing, very, very emotional. Same thing with Bruce McArthur. Many of them still saying that this doesn't give them enough closure. What does this mean then for the victims' families and the friends and the community? Does something like this give them a sense of closure, or does there need to be something more?
Well, I mean, everyone has to keep in mind that no matter how long the sentence, it's not going to be a happy ending for any of the families involved here. And when you look at the ramifications of this, people were sort of complaining in the community here in Toronto about the McArthur sentence, saying that, if you broke it down to a murder-by-murder basis, it would really only be about 3 years per murder. And I don't think that's the right way to look at it. You have to keep in mind these are 8 sentences, each for 25 years. They happen to be running concurrently. And at the end of the day, whether it be consecutive or concurrent, I don't think it's going to make a difference in Mr. McArthur getting out of jail.
Well, such a difficult day for so many people. Criminal lawyer Rob McDonald, really appreciate your time on this. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.